Hello, I am Charles Peralta with BeingLibertarian.com, and today I bring with you presidential candidate Gloria who is not representing libertarianism. Any of our followers will know I'm a little bit more on the capitalist side, but Gloria is not. Gloria, how are you doing? And please explain your candidacy a little bit.
Hi, thank you, Charles. I'm from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I am running for president of the Socialists in 9 states and then writing in other states. In California, I was nominated in a convention this month by the Peace and Freedom Party, which is a ballot access party. And therefore, what we're calling for is a system where healthcare, education are free, where housing is truly a right for all, and where education, for example, is provided by the government. And I know that libertarians are not for that. But we have a view also of freedom that we are not experiencing under capitalism. Under capitalism, especially in the United States, we see everyone's rights are violated by the massive surveillance that has been discovered in recent years, and also the police brutality, which is particularly affecting people of color, Black, Latino, and all working class people. It's an absolute crime when it takes place with these police killings. So we've been very involved in that. And just right now, I'm reading today the article about this woman, Heather Resch, who is the CEO of Mylan Pharmaceuticals. And here she is, part of a conglomerate which purchased a company that makes the EpiPen for people who have crises in allergic reaction.
Allergies, correct.
Maybe people are on the verge of dying until they have that pen. And now that it's being charged $600, this is part of the reason why capitalism is a crime against the people, that they're able to do this in order to make a profit. And very few people will be able to pay $600 for a life-saving instrument.
Okay, so going into this, I think there's a lot we might have to discuss, maybe a little bit of arguing about there. But I just want to ask one question going in, because I've seen your candidacy. I know you've done this before. You actually were able to get a fairly good amount of votes as far as third-party candidates go in previous attempts. But why this party? Why not the Green Party? And do you have any opposition to Jill Stein, who she's running? She's currently in some polls. It seems like she will break at least 1% of the vote nationally. Is there anything wrong with Jill Stein? What are your feelings there?
I think it's great that Jill Stein and the Green Party are doing so well in this election year. And it would be fantastic if they could break one or get more time. If she were on presidential debate with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and myself as well as other third-party candidates, the people of the United States would be have a great opportunity of hearing other proposals, real proposals that would help their lives, instead of hearing Donald Trump promise to evict Mexicans and Hillary Clinton in the pocket of business and things. So I think that the effort of Jill Stein has been great. The Greens are on the ballot in many, many states. They have been on the ballot in many places. We're not running against each other. In reality, Jill Stein and I are not opponents. I think it's good to have more than one voice in the electoral arena talking about jobs, housing, anti-fracking, sustainable agriculture, and energy use. But I'm a socialist, and I've been involved. I was one of the founders of the Party for Socialism and Liberation in 2004. I've been an activist before that. And the socialists believe that it's necessary to call things for what they are. That the capitalist system, it's not even possible to have reform in the era that we're living in. The situation we're living in right now is that has become the rich have become super rich, and the working class, actually the 99%, is falling in the ability to pay rent, in the ability to live. Even middle class families can't pay for their children's education, or they just simply be
Okay.
upset in order for the kids to have an education to make a corporation rich. Well,
Okay.
they bear the burden of student debt. So we're not against each other, but the Greens, I think they have a very good program, but in the essence, we say that the system has to change, and I don't think the Greens are calling for that. In fact, they have said recently neither capitalism nor state socialism. And we think that under socialism, you need to have state.
Okay, now going into this, I like to always talk a little bit about what I agree on and what I disagree on with people. With you guys, I think, look, it's pretty obvious on foreign policy. I think you and I would agree quite a bit on social issues regarding the war on drugs, abortion, gay marriage. We agree. On immigration, I actually am one thing a lot. Some libertarians lately are trying not to be as pro-immigrant. I look at the immigrant population and I kind of say, these are the heroes of America. They are like, I mean, I kind of look at it and say we have a population of 20 million people who America is very happy to put in McDonald's and maids uniforms, but they're not happy to let them be able to just go out and buy health insurance, pay rent, pay taxes, or do pretty much anything. So on the immigrant community, what are your stances there? And also with going into libertarianism, where are the stronger issues that you think we can kind of agree on and make some coalitions build?
Well, my mother is from Mexico. She's born and raised. She's still a permanent resident. My mother has lived here 65 years. She's not a citizen. She is like 15 million other permanent residents in the United States. Most who have lived here for years, if not most of their lives. And they are also, they should be also considered when we talk about immigrants. I think what Donald Trump and other right-wingers are talking about is these 11 million undocumented workers. And I'm glad to hear you say that, talking about immigrants, because whatever the right wing says, the anti-immigrant forces, the reality is that capitalism depends highly on the immigrants. But when you talk about 26 million people, it's just pure racism to me. If you're going to ban some of them, evict 11 million people, it's just a way to whip up hatred and divide what is the working class who creates the wealth for the capitalists, but a way to keep us divided. I think it's really a shame that millions of people have fallen into the lie that the immigrants are the problem, are their problem, have caused problems and poverty. People like billionaires like Donald Trump is actually the one. Trump claims to speak for a section of working people, particularly white people, maybe have less income, and even middle class too. He claims to talk to them against immigrants, but he's the one who gets the raise in the wage. All he said in the beginning was they should just work harder. He's talking about poor people who often have 2 or 3 jobs or can't get a job. So this is a scapegoat to attack immigrants, and we say this: all the immigrants should have full rights. They should be able to vote. They should be able to. Now they pay taxes, by the way, Charles. They pay taxes. We just can't.
Well, they pay sales taxes, they pay embedded taxes, but they do not pay income.
I represented undocumented workers in shops running presses of and they work for years. Very hard workers. They paid Social Security, they paid taxes, and when it came to retire, they were not able to draw on that Social Security, so they're getting ripped off.
Okay, I see a bit what you're saying here. Now, you kind of view immigrants as maybe not the ones who are getting the best gist out of capitalism. I look at it and say I believe the immigrants are proof that capitalism works because, especially with Mexico, we take people who are from a country where it is not a capitalist country, Mexico. Mexico is something I would call a cronyist nation. I've done a lot of work there. It's you have intense laws on just open up a business. You have intense laws on trade. You have these very bizarre like subsidies that go around and a lot of sketchiness and not a lot of safety. And with Mexico, you have these immigrants coming here. I believe they've saved the American agriculture business because they work and, in some jobs on the peak harvest season in Florida and California, they're making well above minimum wage. In fact, they're making, in some cases during peak harvest season in California, they're making $15 an hour for 10-hour days. And if you look at the immigration structure, we have these people who right now, second generation Hispanics are making about $49,000 to $50,000 a year, which is, I believe, $600 below what the average Irish person makes. They are the middle class now. So I look at it and I say, capitalism works, and immigration is the perfect reflection of capitalism. So, got to start this debate somewhere. I think that's a good point to go. How do you feel on that statement?
Well, actually, Mexico is very much a capitalist country. It used to have more protection for the people because of the reforms that came about in the 1930s, much of the way it here with Social Security and other very positive programs. But the NAFTA agreement, the North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States and Canada, has driven the vast majority of Mexicans to deep poverty. It's why so many came after 1994. At least 6 million people were forced off their land, forced out of their jobs and cities to come to the United States and survive. People sometimes say, "Oh, are you for open borders?" And I say the open borders already exist. U.S. capital has been able to flood Mexican markets and destroy the national industry of Mexico on behalf of agribusiness in the United States, corn growers, soybean growers.
But what excuse me.
That's the ones who suffer as a result are Mexican and American workers.
But what you're speaking about here is largely the agriculture business, where there was a deal within NAFTA, which they did say the U.S. will provide surplus food to to Mexico, which did lower the price of food and did wipe a lot of the farmers out. But that's not free trade. That's not capitalism. That is cronyism. And there is a difference there. I mean, saying that you have perfect capitalism with NAFTA is like saying you have perfect socialism with some very bad socialist countries that I think you could name some over the years, where they followed special interest of people. I mean, there is bad socialism, there is bad capitalism, but to say NAFTA is a capitalist bill is just not exactly that accurate.
Well, actually, it is capitalist because the premise of capitalism is unfettered production, competition between companies that produce similar products. It's a war between each other to try to outdo the other in production, marketing, selling, in order to make a profit. The one who gets on top is the one who wins. The other one maybe collapses, falls, or is merged with another company. So that is capitalism. The subsidies, the billions of dollars of subsidies given to agribusiness in order to keep growing, and then they have to sell their product. There's a saturated overproduction in the United States of corn, for example. That's why the barriers that Mexico had to protect its national domestic economy, to protect the farm workers, the farmers who grew corn for Mexican consumption, they were destroyed when NAFTA said no more tariffs, no more protection of your industry, and American corn flooded Mexican markets. That is capitalism. That's expand or die. Expand your production, your market, your sales, your capital abroad, or you will die.
Well, I mean, that is not capitalism. Using
I'd
that.
like to bring it back to the issue of.
Okay, please.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, I was going to say, well, using that logic, I mean, with capitalism, capitalism I've always described as you have capital, and then you make up it with your resources. The idea of subsidizing an industry, that is simply not capitalism. That's cronyism. That is in some definition socialism, but it's not capitalism. Capitalism is the freedom of the market, and it's the protection of resources. It's kind of a libertarian essence. It's freedom. But going into this a little bit more, with the idea of competition and capitalism, you kind of said that there are these wars between companies. Right now, you mentioned the EpiPen. Because of and also there was that person about a year ago, Martin Schreckl, I believe his name was, with that drug who he raised the price on. Those are people who the FDA makes it a 15-year process to get something like the EpiPen on the market. They have given them a permanent patent, which I'm an inventor. I have several patents, but they've given them a permanent patent, which is something I could not have. Don't you feel that that is the government just in the pockets of these companies, and they're not forming capitalism, they're not forming socialism, but they're forming some sort of cronyist system, which is kind of a mix of everything? And don't you see that as perhaps the bigger problem?
Uh, Actually, the Epic trends has been passed for years. It was one company that bought up another company and decided to jack up the prices.
But
I
no,
agree.
but buying that product, they did buy the patent rights on it, and they did buy the security.
Of crony capitalism versus pure capitalism, they're all forms of capitalism. And yes, the government is intervening on behalf of the capital. But I dare say that libertarians who I see call for the government not to provide for education or things like social programs, leave it to the market. I think that that would be an utter disaster, and that vision of capitalism would fail. The capitalism, the, whatever programs have come about in society, in our society, whether it's social programs, public education, firefighting, services that the people need in general, water supply, everything. Those kind of things have come about either through struggle, for example, unions to take back some of the profit in order to have decent wage or conditions in the workplace, or the kind of things that a society needs to be organized.
Well, unions are
infrastructure. All those things are necessary for society to survive.
Well, I'm just going to say this. Unions are part of capitalism. The right to organize is a capitalist right. I mean, there's some people who say they want right to work laws which disrupt union contracts, but that violates capitalism. That is a government intervention. But if you look at it, I mean, there was for 50 years almost no involvement of government in unions. Now, you look at what happened with some unions and some government. I would point out South Africa during the apartheid. South Africa had many, many unions where they would go to the government and they would do laws similar, like which would basically be union pay laws similar to what America has with Davis-Bacon. They would artificially raise the minimum wage, and they would stifle out non-union workers. Now, I'm pro-union. I think unions are a good thing, but I mean, to say that they're like that's not part of capitalism, but also I would point out unions can hurt, can sometimes make laws to hurt other people not in the union. But I think that's a problem. But I want to get one point that you mentioned regarding America's healthcare industry, because I think that's a point. I would say that America's healthcare industry is, while the government does not pay for it like some other countries do, we're still probably the least free healthcare industry. If you look at FDA restrictions, we have more restrictions to get a pill than any part of the country. If you look at the population to the amount of medical school licenses to be a doctor given, we're the worst in the world on that front, mainly because of government restriction. And also, if you look at it, America is the only country where we cannot where we cannot go out this and say, we can't import a pill from another part of the world. We can't import pills from London. We can't import medical equipment. We can't have doctors come over here. If you look at Europe, a doctor in Finland can go to Denmark or London or wherever without any regulation. So I see this as a major problem, and I don't see capitalism as the issue. I see government as the issue. But what will be your response there?
Well, first of all, something you said in the very beginning. I am a firm believer in unions, and the unions rose up under the system of capitalism of the workers who needed to organize in order to protect their lives. People were dying. They had long working hours. All the kind of rights that people have thanks to the union. In terms of the medical field and the standards and what you call restrictions, I believe that in terms of medical production of medicine and so on, there are universal standards for producing new medicines. I think, unfortunately, in the United States, in recent years, the corporations are pushing a much faster release of the medicine that they're making in order to make that profit in the stock market. We see now, even in U.S. television, every night you see all these ads that say, you might have this illness, and take this pill. You might die. Take it anyway. Tell your doctor you need to have it. That's super capital.
Well, no, well, to explain that a little bit more, because I have a little bit of background in the health.
You need a profit. So I think that there is a need for restriction on these pharmaceuticals, severe restriction on these pharmaceuticals, that people.
Well, I'm just going to ask this.
Should be a priority over the right to make a profit. As far as doctors and study and how it is to become a doctor, I think it is necessary to have years of education to be able to be a doctor. I think education should be free. A person who wants to be a doctor shouldn't have to pay for it. That way, the cost would be much less, so they wouldn't have to transfer that cost of their extremely high education to the patient. I think profit should be taken out completely from medicine.
Well, I'm actually gonna ask
abolish the healthcare insurance company.
Well,
I'm gonna provide healthcare.
Well, I'm going to ask a few questions based on this. Now, regarding the FDA, let's try and make these questions a little bit quicker, more like in the answers 15-second range.
Yeah.
Just to like speak, because there was a lot in healthcare I'd like to touch on. Regarding the FDA, I mean, right now I can't imagine a process where it takes any longer. It's 12 to 15 years to get a basic pill across. Also, if you were to go back to the 90s and you were to look at the exact same results in the testing today, they have shown that you could get a pill on the market with the same safety securities we had 20 years ago in the 90s for half the time, maybe even a third of the time, with the same exact security we had 20 years ago, the same exact certainty of safety. But yet the government has made it longer and not shorter to release these things. And it is helping big pharmaceuticals. It's making it so that the startup industry for the biotech space and the medical space is something where you have to get bought out by a big company. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. But how much more would you want to regulate this space? I mean, is it going to take 20 years? Is it going to take 30 years to get a drug on the market? There's always going to be some risk attached. I mean, you can't live in a risk-free society.
I think that the problem is capitalism and the healthcare system. For example, you have all these pharmaceuticals competing with each other to produce certain drugs that they know people desperately need for their care. And they know that people are needing it badly. They then charge mint for the hepatitis C, for example, which costs $1,000 a day.
But here's the thing. What's wrong with the competition? Right now, excuse me.
Insures people of hep C. And it's a crime, an absolute crime, that company can charge that much. It doesn't cost that much to produce that pill.
It costs billions of dollars to get that through the market. It costs billions. It has millions of insurance on it.
To save your life, and so they jack it up as high as they can.
I would say this. That's with the. Well, I mean, the thing is, with the EpiPen and with these drugs, first off, they cost billions of dollars to get through the market. This is not a cheap thing to do, because there is a lot of testing. And if you go 10 years through the FDA or 15 years, it will cost you about $800 million to $3 billion to get a drug. So justifying a $200 pill, it's the cost of the testing and the cost of getting it done. There's also probably about a $30 insurance fee on that to make sure you can pay people out if they are damaged by it, which is a risk that happens. But for the competition, you mentioned hepatitis D. There are patents on that. There's not a lot of competition. You mentioned the EpiPen. There's no competition. That is a monopoly, and I would say a government-granted monopoly due to the intellectual property structure and due to the FDA regulations making it hard to get someone through. But for competition, you put one store next to another, and I say, you have a store, I have a store. I say I'm going to price this widget at $10, and you know the margins. My margin is $5 off of that widget. You say I can do it for $9, and I could save $1 for the consumer, and I can still profit off of this, and I can still exist. Why wouldn't that benefit the healthcare space? Because there is no competition in healthcare. You can't buy drugs from other countries. The only country if you could buy drugs from other countries, that same drug that Martin Schrekel or whatever his name was wanted to produce, you could have bought it in South Africa for $3. For the EpiPen, there's actually a company that they've licensed it to in Europe, which does it for much cheaper. mainly because they license to a bunch of companies in Europe, and they license it to a company in Africa and a company in Asia, where you can buy between them. Isn't this damaging the system?
Well, there's certainly something to be said about international cooperation. I look to Cuba as a great example of how the healthcare system should be run. That you have all the scientists, all the developers of medicine work together because the profit motive is taken out. And then they're developing medicine that we're only talking about in the United States. They also have years that it takes to produce the medicine to bring it to the public use. Because they have to test it so that people are protected. They have a lung cancer vaccine that pharmaceuticals in the U.S. is dying to get a hold of, so they can bring to market in the United States. But they want to charge much more in the U.S. Cuba can be provided for free. I prefer to look at that and say that's how we should have our medical system. That they have a very developed industry, but their motivation is to save people, is to cure people, is to treat people on a humane basis, and not for profit.
Well, I would say that with Cuba, I'm
Healthcare for the people and not profit.
with Cuba, I would look at it and I would say that with their system, they've had a few innovations, nothing in comparison. If you look at the population of Cuba, you look at the population of America, America produces about 60% of the new drugs, new medical equipment, new treatments. And also, most of the world, almost, I would say 99% of the world, the pharmaceutical industries operate on a for-profit capitalist system. I've dealt with companies in Israel. I have dealt with companies in Switzerland, London. I've seen them all. I've researched them all. Most of the world's pharmaceuticals are capitalist. And regarding this lung cancer vaccine, I mean, I would say the factor is not just monetizing it. The problem is really that there has not been an approval process in the FDA, and they're saying it might be another 15-year process to get it through, even though Cuba has some evidence it might be safe, and it might not work. But I think that is an issue. And I see this as a problem here. But also, I'd like to point to that regarding doctors. My father is actually an orthopedic surgeon. He's been a surgeon for about 30 years. He started a practice with 200 people. He would not have gone into medicine, I don't believe, if it wasn't for larger amounts of money, because there is 12 years of school you're required to do it on. His work hours when he started out in his career, and I was just young, were almost 100 hours a week. If you were to tell him he was not going to make as much money, he would quit. I mean, he was making perhaps, I think in his prime, over $750,000 a year. How much do you think he should make?
I think we have to change the motivation of society for the kind of fields that people enter for employment. I think that doctors should be, young people who want to become doctors should know that the greatest thing to be a doctor is to be able to help people. That's what the medical field should be for. And I think that your father may make a very, very high wage, but many doctors are overworked. Most doctors are overworked. They work in unbelievable hours, which isn't very safe for the patient. And if you take away the cost of education, the cost of living in America, if you provide free healthcare for all people, including for doctors and nurses and all the other workers in the hospitals and medical clinics, then people don't have to make those $100,000. By the way, the janitors who work in the hospitals don't make that much. They don't even.
The janitors are not going to school for 12 years. The janitors are not. The janitors are not working 100-hour weeks for the most part.
They shouldn't have to worry about having insurance, medical malpractice. If there are accidents in the medical care, if there's things that cause someone to suffer from being in a hospital, for example, it shouldn't be on the doctor. People should be taken care of by the government, and yes, I think that the government should have to worry about people having income if they're becoming unable for as long as they need it.
But who's going to
And
pay
that's
for
what
this, by the way?
taxation.
Because that's the
I
core
don't
question.
think that a doctor should make $700,000 to be a surgeon. It just comes, it boomerangs back to the patient. There have been cases now where even when people have healthcare insurance, that if they have a procedure and a doctor calls in from the outside to perform part of that procedure, then the patient has to pay way beyond the cost of the copay or the premium to pay that doctor then. It's just become outrageous what people have to pay for medical care.
But I'm looking at this saying, with your plan, I don't think it would actually lead to free healthcare. I don't think free education, the same way I don't think free education leads to free education. I mean, right now, America spends about 1.5 trillion on healthcare. If you were to actually give more access to these services, there would be a higher demand. More people would want these services done, and there would be some problems there. But 1.5 trillion added to what the government spends currently. The federal government currently spends a little under $4 trillion. So you'd have to do a 40 to 50% spending increase to do this. Now, and also I think the price would go up astronomically. If you look at Medicare, spends more 100% more than what they projected it to spend at this point in time 30 years ago. If you look at the roads, I mean, the roads were kind of handled horribly. I mean, the Highway Trust Fund, they said that the Highway Trust Fund would have $200 billion in it right now if it wasn't for like these little pet projects that help get politicians get reelected, such as hot air balloon rides, biking trips, and roads that really don't even have any use. So I look at it and I say that with the healthcare industry, it's not going to be free. It's just going to come for you at tax rates. I mean, I don't think, like, you can say people are going to get free this, free that, but be free. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about taxes. I mean, let's just say, because I mentioned inventor, let's just say I licensed a product that I'm making $300,000 a year. What would be in the Gloria I world? What would be my tax rate? I'm just curious here on that front.
Well, I want to answer something you said about the cost of healthcare. Healthcare, healthcare is expensive. Medical equipment, all the things we know about. But it would be cheaper in many ways for people to have preventive care. Unfortunately, many people avoid going to the doctor. 30 million people still don't have health care, and they go to emergency hospitals when they're really sick. In fact, preventive care keeps people healthy. Then you have the cost in our society of hundreds of thousands, literally, of soldiers who returned physically or psychologically damaged, very, very harmed by war. That is a cost nobody should have to bear, especially the soldiers and the people killed.
Well, a lot of these soldiers,
I want to just put that out.
well, a lot of these soldiers, they have government health care, they have government hospitals, and they're run terribly.
We call for a huge increase in taxation. Corporations, which today are not paying any tax, but war profiteers like General Dynamics, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, they aren't paying taxes because they have all kinds of people. In fact, they're making profits and we're paying. Taxes should be raised on the 1%.
But you could raise taxes on the 1%. You could raise taxes on the one. Excuse me. You could raise taxes on the 1%. To 100% of their income. You could take all of Bill Gates' money, which, by the way, if Bill Gates' wealth, Warren Buffett's wealth, it's all net worth. So if they had to sell it to pay taxes on that, it would go down dramatically in value. The stock market would probably collapse from that. But if you were to tax the top 1% at 100% of their income, you would still not have enough money to cover, I believe, a third of these programs. I mean, and also, if you tax them at 100%, what happens to people who are in the top, like the second percent? Are they people who make less going to make more because of taxes? There is a ladder where you do have to raise everybody's taxes. You do have to raise the top 10%, the top 20%, and ideally the top 50%. So, I mean,
in the 1950s, in the early 1950s, the government budget was run. It ran on 50% of the government budget was from corporate taxes. Today, it's only 10%. In other words, the burden of running a society in this country has fallen on the shoulders of working people. And the taxes come in many forms. They come, for example, in California and many, many states to pay education to the lottery. It's working people who buy lottery tickets. So that's a hidden tax. The taxes of running city government comes from jacking up the parking fee, fine. I was just on a street in San Francisco here yesterday with people who hadn't paid us there were pulled off the bus and given $112 fine. That's paid for the cop. An unnecessary charge. Public transportation should be free so that people don't have to drive in cars.
Well,
Public transportation should be free for people.
hold on. Well, public transportation, now I live in New York City. Public transportation to get on the subway is about $2, and it's heavily subsidized by our city government. If we were to get rid of this, so would you support getting rid of the $2 fee? Would you support so I can go to the subway for free? Would you say that's okay?
Oh, I think it would be tremendous. You know how many people would drive in cars?
But hold on for a moment. If we were to subsidize the subway using tax dollars instead and not have people pay the $2 fee, wouldn't that just lead to an influx of people using the subway, more people using the subway because it doesn't cost as much? You can just walk around whenever you want. And at the same time, people who might not use the subway as much are ended up paying for it and subsidizing it. And this is kind of the same thing I say on healthcare, the same thing I say on education. If you require people to pay for other people's resources, someone might say, oh, I'm going to get a PhD in liberal arts, which really doesn't have that much value to the economy as a whole in some cases. Some people might say, okay, if healthcare is free, I'm going to go to the doctor every 3 months, which, eventually you reach a point that doesn't save money. It is preventative care, but it wouldn't save money. And with the subway, you would just have, and also it leads to more lines. It leads to higher cost. Don't you see that this could be a system where you collapse itself? And I mean, shouldn't there be?
All the things you're saying, those are like capitalism. And people just go to the doctor whenever they want so much. People need to go to the doctor when they don't feel well. They should go on a regular basis for preventive, like having medical tests to make sure that you are healthy. The thing about people riding the subway all the time, no. People don't want to just get on the subway because it's free. They get on the subway because they have to go somewhere. People have their lives. They have a schedule in their life. And so many people have to walk so far, or people have cars because here in the Bay Area, San Francisco, it costs a fortune. It costs so much money to be on BART. It even costs you more than $10 a day to have public transportation. The people are riding their cars into the city, and it's just, the highways are jammed. And look at Los Angeles. Los Angeles needs a gigantic expansion of their subway system because the air is just so polluted. There's too many cars. But we know that in the early part of last century, the trolley systems in many cities were demolished in order for the auto industry and the oil industry to be able to push those cars and push that gas. That's why we have global warming today.
Well, wouldn't you say that, okay, the trolley industry, for example, kind of got destroyed, kind of got stepped on? Wouldn't you say that that's once again... Okay, but wouldn't you say that's an example of government working with big business and destroying an industry where it's not capitalism, it's cronyism? And to some extent, and also, by the way, if we're going to have a socialist society, what stops it from just being that every night and day? Because if you look at the original definition of the word monopoly, it began in the 1500s. It began to describe a monopoly as something when a king or a queen or someone of royal power would give someone the right over a certain industry. What about a socialism stops someone from saying, okay, this person's going to be the king of oil, this person's going to be the king of copper, this person's going to be the king of public transportation, and they're going to make an enormous amount of money, not really having to ever have competition? And also, what is the incentive for for example, if we have these public transit services that are run by the government, someone wants to introduce a private, like, I mean, actually, I think the best example is Uber and the dollar cab system that's going across the country right now. There was a taxi cab union which the government basically controlled. They made it so that if you were a cab driver, you had medallions, there was a finite amount of people on that service, and they subsidized it. They essentially ran it. They ran the unions. They ran the pricing. Uber comes along, the dollar cabs come along, and it gives people another option. Companies make money, but consumers are happier. Wouldn't you say that that's some benefit of capitalism? And wouldn't you say in a social society, you might not have that choice?
I would like to talk about one issue of this. I'm not sure what that term is. All these services that are provided by the individual, like Uber or the Airbnb. The Airbnb has led to the eviction of many, many people, where now the incentive, especially here in San Francisco, for example, is for the landlord, the owner of home, to evict the tenant and then turn that house that used to be a rental property into essentially a hotel. And so many, many people are losing their housing, and that is part of capitalism. Same thing with Uber. I think that it's a side service, yes, but now you find workers in Uber drivers having to organize, which is a good thing. They have to organize so that they have wage minimum rights, so they have conditions and rights, so the passengers are also protected. But I think in terms of transportation, that we need more public transportation. We need more intercity buses, like Greyhound has cut way, way back because it doesn't provide a profit for that. But a lot of people need to be able to travel from one town to another. And I think we need more of a public bus system between cities. We need more trains. We need more public transportation to help relieve this demand for cars, 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 which the auto companies constantly having to sell their automobiles. And by the way, I think there's a huge waste in society of advertising. Every night you see these car companies pushing, like using human sentiment. Oh, if you love your family, you will buy this car for them. That's ridiculous. It's such a waste having advertising.
Well, I mean, it's promoting a product. I mean,
go eat a meal outside. Advertising is a gigantic waste.
well, I mean, advertising doesn't cost a company very much. On average, a company spends about 4 or 5% of their budget on advertising, unless it's more of a company such as, I don't know, Coca-Cola, where maybe that's a little bit higher. But for advertising, you say you don't really care for them? Uh, doesn't it get a new product across? If I invent something, I launch a new product, don't I need to advertise to get it across? The same with Uber. And there is some compulsion here, and it does. And here's the thing: if the advertising budgets were too high and it was too much money, people would not pay for the services. But here, people are paying for Uber. But I just want to go back to the topic of Airbnb for a moment. I mean, there's a trade-off there. Some people cannot. Some people are. Some apartment owners and some landlord owners are saying they prefer Airbnb over just renting because it does make them more money. But why is that a bad thing? I mean, because right now I look at it and I say, okay, there's a lot of people in San Francisco who can't affordably travel there without finding a place to stay. This provides them a cheaper and better option. And I also would point out with San Francisco, the same thing as Manhattan. If you look at zoning laws, it is the most heavily regulated. Well, these are the two most regularly regulated places in the country. And there's been tons of efforts to build more properties in San Francisco. If you have a 5-story building and you want to tear it down, make it a 10-story building, you're going to be there for 10 years trying to get the regulation and the permits to do that. Doesn't that make it so people cannot have a place to live? And also,
no, there's regulations for the capital. In the state of California, the Ellis Act, this horrible law, allows a landlord to declare he will no longer rent to people. So he can evict people with no protection for the tenants. So we need more protection for tenants, across this country. In fact, I call for a rollback in rent. And now it's a median price of a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco to rent $4,000. That's an outrage. That's beyond a ripoff. People are being defeated.
Well, how would you plan to get that lower? How do you plan to make it rent cheaper?
Any right of any landlord. I'm against landlordism, by the way. I don't think anyone should be able to own someone else's home. A home is a right. Charles, I have to get to work.
Okay, so you have to get going. It was very nice speaking to you.
I have to get going because I can't be late for work. I work every day.
Okay, it was very nice speaking to you. Interested with your candidacy. Final statement, final question. Going into this campaign, how are you feeling? And any final thoughts?
I'm very excited about the campaign because we're reaching out to people who had no idea that there was a socialist on the ballot, who appreciate what we're saying about the debt should be canceled completely, bailout students not paying, those kind of things. And I think that this is an unusual election year, as you well know, that people like alternate candidates are finding a voice finally, and people are looking beyond the Democrats and Republicans. Saying it used to be like, I'm not going to waste my vote voting for a third party, and now people are saying, I'm not going to waste my vote voting for Trump or Clinton.
Okay.
So much.
Okay, Gloria, it was great speaking to you, and have a very nice day. Good luck too.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.